Oden was paralyzed with fear as he saw what appears to be his own lord charging with his horse into a wall of spears. "I am Tokugawa Ieyasu," he heard the rider proclaim before he vanished under a sea of red. Then he saw another rider hastily making his way towards the castle. It took him a second to realize who he was. It was his master, Lord Ieyasu. There was no mistaking him. He could tell him by his elaborate helmet. He was in danger, for crimson-clad warriors were fast approaching him. Oden spurred his horse to catch up. "Protect Lord Tokugawa!" he screamed at the rest of the guards, who tried to keep the enemies away from their master. Thrusting his spear, he managed to fell one of them from his mount. He rode next to his lord for another 50 meters, holding back anyone who dared approach, until an arrow found him at his back. His hands relaxed, letting his spear fall to the ground before he himself followed, but not before managing to catch a glimpse of his lord safely galloping away. Content he had fulfilled his duty, Oden closed his eyes. Welcome back to another episode of our series on the Sengoku Jidai, and the second on Tokugawa Ieyasu. In this video we will see his conquest of Totomi Province, his clash with the legendary Takeda Shingen, and the catastrophic Battle of Mikatagahara. Every week we release 3 new exclusive videos for our members and patrons. The Pacific War, the Eastern Front of World War II Prelude, and many other series, including the War of Spanish Succession, Punic Wars, Iberian Reconquista, Russian Revolution and Civil War, North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, and much more. It has been long overdue, but we have finally created a YouTube channel exclusively for our Kings and Generals podcasts. Please go and check out Kings and Generals podcast, home to the Pacific War Week by Week podcast and the Fall and Rise of China podcast, link in the description and pinned comment. To see those, as well as get access to our exclusive Discord, see our schedule, and get early access to all videos, join the ranks of our patrons and YouTube members via the links in the description and pinned comment. Thanks to our supporters for allowing us to continue doing our dream job. In the previous episode, we followed Ieyasu's early life until his consolidation of control over Mikawa province and his alliance with Oda Nobunaga. While Nobunaga was definitely the rising star of Japan at this time and capable of exerting more influence, Ieyasu was not lacking in ambition. Having secured Mikawa for the Matsudaira clan, his gaze turned towards the lands of Totomi and Suruga, which were still ruled by his former overlords, the Imagawa. Before moving on with the invasion of Totomi and Suruga, let us first talk a bit about yet another name change for Ieyasu, and thankfully the last one. In 1567, Ieyasu was able to obtain a permit from the emperor to change his last name to Tokugawa, claiming descent from the Seiwa Genji via a branch of the Nita clan. Initially, the imperial court had refused to grant him this right, as there had been no evidence of such pedigree in the Matsudaira clan. However, Ieyasu was able to find, or rather construct, a genealogical document proving his lineage. Thus, he was permitted to adopt the last name of Tokugawa. He was also appointed as Mikawa no Kami, Lord of Mikawa, and received the junior 5th rank in court. This might seem of little significance at first, but for a man as ambitious as Tokugawa, having the right pedigree was paramount, for only those descended from the Seiwa Genji and related to the Minamoto clan could claim the title of shogun. Perhaps Ieyasu was planning too far ahead, but history proved him right in the end, so who are we to judge him? As we established in our previous video, Imagawa Yoshimoto was not a great military leader, and since the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, his son Ujizane was equally incapable, if not worse. Despite that, the Imagawa still wielded considerable strength, and were allied to some of the most powerful clans of Japan, the Hojo of Segami Province and the Takeda of Kai. The latter was by far the biggest threat. The Takeda cavalry had no equal in the land of the rising sun. Their daimyo, known as Takeda Harinobu, or alternatively by his Buddhist name of Shingen, was considered one of, if not the greatest military strategist at the time, his only equal being his great rival Uesugi Kenshin. It is therefore understandable that Ieyasu could not blindly move against the Imagawa, not unless something would disturb the balance of power. Luckily for him, Shingen was more than eager to accelerate the fall of the declining Imagawa clan and claim their lands for his own. Such a move against a decades-old ally was not easily accepted by everyone. For one thing, his eldest, albeit illegitimate son, Yoshinobu, was married to Ujizane's sister and naturally objected to his father going to war with his father-in-law. For the sake of his wife, Yoshinobu rebelled against his father, only for Harinobu to defeat him, capture him, and execute him. Along with Yoshinobu, one of Shingen's most trusted advisors, known as 24 Generals Obu Toramasa, was also forced to commit seppuku for the same reason. With their deaths, the Takeda camp was now unified behind their daimyo's will. Shingen had already established an alliance with the Oda by marrying his daughter Matsuhime to Nobunaga's son and heir Nobutada. Though the marriage was never consummated, it secured the alliance between the two clans, at least for the time being. Shingen then extended this pact to Ieyasu, suggesting they attack Ujizane together and split up the Imagawa lands between themselves. Totomi province would go to the Tokugawa and Suruga to the Takeda. Ieyasu accepted, probably thinking that in the future he would have to face Shingen either way, so he might as well benefit from them for now. The war with the Imagawa was easier than one would have expected. Facing the much stronger Takeda forces, Ujizane's troops only temporarily managed to put a stop to the invaders at Sata Mountain Pass, while others who had secretly switched sides preferred flight to fight. Seeing how hopeless his position was, Ujizane also decided to flee Suruga and sought refuge in Kakegawa Castle in Totomi. The news of their lord's retreat to Totomi disheartened the remaining Imagawa soldiers, and the entire line collapsed, leaving the road to Sumpu open. Led by Baba Nobuharu, the Takeda forces marched to the capital of the Imagawa and put it to the torch, despite Shingen's desire to take Ujizane's villa untouched on account of the many treasures the Imagawa had collected over the ages. However, while the Imagawa had offered little resistance, Shingen's actions aggravated the third party of the alliance, Hojo Ieyasu, who dispatched his son Ujimasa to march on Suruga during the first days of 1569 at the head of 45,000 men. In response, the Takeda fortified the Sata Pass, just as the Imagawa had done before, blocking the Hojo advance. Shingen's men were already facing a shortage of military provisions, and their situation worsened when they launched a failed attack against Imagawa's Omiya Castle that controlled the Nakamichi and Suruga roads. By March, their lack of supplies forced Shingen to pull back the majority of his troops to Kai through the much harder Taru Pass, with Ujimasa also retreating back to Sagami. While this was happening at Suruga, Ieyasu had invaded Totomi from Mikawa by way of Jinza Pass. He quickly captured Futamata and Hikima castles and laid siege to Kakegawa Castle, where Ujizane had barricaded himself. Kakegawa's defenders had also been reinforced by Hojo troops that had arrived by sea, while some other Imagawa-owned castles lay at its periphery, namely Horie, Utsuyama and Horikawa. Ieyasu settled down for a long siege and built up his own defenses around Kakegawa. But the Imagawa forces did not sit idle, launching numerous attacks and at times forcing the Tokugawa forces to retreat. Nevertheless, the castle was eventually surrounded. While Shingen's position gradually worsened as his army was bogged down by Ujimasa's army and loyal Imagawa forces had recaptured Sunpu, Ieyasu was enjoying some success, capturing the castles of Utsuyama, Horikawa and Horie in March. Following this, Ieyasu entered negotiations with Ujizane, promising to help him regain Suruga if he gave Totomi to him. Ujizane accepted, and Kakegawa Castle was delivered to the Tokugawa on the 6th of May. Not long after, Ieyasu ended his alliance with Shingen and entered into one with Uesugi Kenshin. Ujizane fled to Hojo-controlled Izu, and to flip the finger to both Shingen and Ieyasu, there he wrote a letter proclaiming that he was transferring lordship of both Suruga and Totomi to Hojo Ujimasa's eldest son, Ujinao, who at that time was still a small child. Of course, this mattered little, as Ieyasu was firmly in control of Totomi, and Shingen was not going to give up on conquering Suruga. In June, Ujimasa and Uesugi Kenshin formalized an alliance against the Takeda, an event that did nothing to stop Shingen from coming down from Kai that very same month. He first invaded Hojo lands, devastating part of Mishima and Izu, before turning westwards to invade Suruga a second time and tie up loose ends. His third attack on Omiya Castle the following month proved fruitful, and Fuji County fell under Takeda control. From there, the Tiger of Kai had his troops retreat to Kofu, and after securing a peace treaty with the Uesugi, he attacked the Hojo lands in Musashi by way of Shinano province. This wasn't an honest invasion to wrestle control of Kanto from the Hojo, but a diversion to draw Ujimasa's forces away from Suruga and into Kanto, and it worked like a charm. Having achieved this, Shingen retreated back to Kofu in October and prepared to invade Suruga a third time. This time, Shingen would be successful. He captured Kambara Castle in early December, and this caused the remaining Hojo troops in the area to retreat. With the road open, the Takeda forces captured Sumpu, and from then on advanced at a slower pace until in December of 1571, 2 months after the death of Hojo Ieyasu, the two clans made peace and signed a new alliance between them, bringing the third invasion of Suruga to an end and the province becoming part of Shingen's domain, with the exception of a few small parts that remained under Hojo control. While Takeda Shingen was fighting the Hojo left and right to secure his hold on Suruga, Tokugawa Ieyasu was solidifying his control of Totomi. In early 1570, he transferred his capital from Okazaki to Hikuma, which he renamed Hamamatsu, and expanded upon its castle town and defenses. He passed the ancestral seat of the Matsudaira to his eldest son Nobuyasu. Only a few months later, Ieyasu would find himself embroiled in a new conflict as his trusted ally, Oda Nobunaga, had a fallout with Shogun Ashikaga Yoshiaki and was at war with the Asakura clan of Echizen. Details of this conflict can be found in our Nobunaga video, so for now, it will suffice to say that Ieyasu and his men followed the Oda force in Echizen, capturing 2 forts at Tezusuyama and Kamigasaki. However, the Azai clan of Omi sided with the Asakura and were now marching, threatening to encircle the Oda Tokugawa army. Upon hearing of this, Nobunaga called for a war council, in which an immediate retreat was decided, with Ieyasu and Toyotomi Hideyoshi appointed to lead the rearguard and hold off the Asakura forces that were pursuing them. Thanks to the restrictions of these two men, the combined allied forces were able to retreat to safety. Ieyasu briefly went back to Hamamatsu, where he mustered a larger force of around 5,000 men. In July, he once more joined Nobunaga in the field, this time at Anigawa. There, on the northern bank of the river, the Azai and Asakura had deployed their combined armies, numbering no more than 20,000 men. Initially, Ieyasu was supposed to form his army opposite the Azai, who were fewer in number than the Asakura. However, since Nobunaga harbored personal hate towards Azai Nagamasa, they switched positions, and Ieyasu deployed his hardened Mikawa Bushi on the west side, opposite the Asakura troops. Sakai Tadetsugu and Ishikawa Kazumasa led Ieyasu's vanguard, while Honda Tadakatsu and Sakakibara Yasumasa the rearguard. Again, the details about this battle can be found in our Nobunaga videos, so for now we will only say that the battle was largely won thanks to Ieyasu's experienced soldiers, who broke the Asakura forces and attacked the Azai on the right flank. After this, Inaba Etetsu attacked the Azai on their left flank, forcing them to flee the battlefield. With the Azai and Asakura on the back foot, Nobunaga was able to handle the situation by himself, so Ieyasu returned to Hamamatsu. As we have already mentioned, Shingen concluded his conquest of Suruga in the autumn. After allying himself with the Hojo to secure his rear, he decided to march all the way to Kyoto, heeding the call of Shogun Yoshiaki, who was more or less begging for someone to save him from Nobunaga. In October of 1572, after waiting for the winter snows to block the northern passes that would prevent his rival Kenshin from coming down, Shingen led a 30,000-strong force into Totomi. His forces were further bolstered by an additional 2,000-strong regiment that was lent to him by Hojo Ujimasa. At the same time, another division, numbering some 5,000 warriors, led by Yamagata Masakage, marched towards Mikawa. Ieyasu sent a small reconnaissance force of around 3,000 men under Okubo Tadio and Honda Tadakatsu, but they were unable to achieve anything. Meanwhile, Masakage was able to link up with the main force after taking Yoshida Castle, which captured Kakegawa and Futamata. Shingen was now fast approaching Ieyasu and his 8,000 men at his stronghold in Hamamatsu. However, the first foreign banners Ieyasu's men watched approaching from their towers did not belong to the daimyo of Kai, but to Nobunaga, who had heeded his allies' plea for help and dispatched 3,000 men under Sakuma Nobumori, Hirate Hirohide, and Takegawa Kazumasu. This number might seem small, but we must also remember that Nobunaga was already invested in his own conflicts, and his forces were already spread thin. With the arrival of the Oda forces, Ieyasu held a war council, where Nobunaga's generals advised him to assume a defensive stance. However, in a rare case of carelessness, Ieyasu decided to take the field and led his forces out to a plain called Mikatagahara, not even a mile north of Hamamatsu. There he deployed his army in a stork's wing formation, using the Magome River to cover his right flank. Behind the long front line followed the main body, commanded by Ieyasu himself. On his right he placed Nobunaga's men, and on the extreme right flank there was another group of Mikawa samurai led by Sakai Tadetsugu. On the left flank, He placed men under Ogasawara Nagayoshi, Matsudaira Ietada, Honda Tadakatsu, and Ishikawa Kazumasa. Shingen had deployed his own forces in a fish-scale formation, with Oyamada Nobushige leading the vanguard, Naito Masatoyo and Yamagata Masakage in the second line, his son Katsuyori and Ubata Masamori in the third, and Baba Nobuharu in the rear. Further behind was Shingen himself, commanding 15,000 men. It was during a light snowfall, around 4 in the afternoon, when the Takeda unleashed their first frontal assault towards Ieyasu's position. Ieyasu had a number of arquebus-equipped ashigaru and was hoping that the Takeda assault would be broken by their volleys. However, they proved ineffective, and Shingen's men crashed into Ieyasu's two flanks. The left flank, which was made up of Mikawa troops and led by more experienced generals like Tadakatsu, was able to resist and even push back the assault. That was not the case for the Oda men, who were overwhelmed. Sekima and Tokugawa turned tail and retreated, while Hirohide perished in the fight and his men fled. Thus, Sakai Tadasugu was left isolated in the extreme right and was pushed back towards the main body. Taking advantage of his vast numbers, Shingen rotated his forces and threw fresh regiments into combat. Facing the renewed Takeda assault, even the hardened Mikawa troops began faltering and retreating en masse. In an attempt to rally them back, Ieyasu ordered Okubo Tadio to plant his standard, a giant golden fan, on a hill near Saigedake to serve as a rally point. He himself went to assist Mizuno Tadashige, who had been trapped fighting two of Shingen's divisions. It was a completely suicidal decision, and Ieyasu would have perished there had not one of his retainers, by the name of Natsume Yoshinobu, intervened. It is said that Yoshinobu struck Ieyasu's horse with the back of his sword, sending it running towards the rear, while he screamed, "I am Tokugawa Ieyasu," and charged towards the Takeda soldiers, who had almost surrounded Tokugawa's bodyguard, and met his end. As for Ieyasu, he barely escaped and made his way to Hamamatsu, where he ordered for the gates to remain open and for big fires to be lit, employing the empty fort stratagem. It was a risky move, but it worked. As Yamagata Masakage and Baba Nobuharu approached the castle, they were puzzled by the situation and dared not to attack. That night, just to reinforce their assumption that the Tokugawa had not been entirely defeated, Ieyasu sent Okubo Tadio and Amano Yasukage with a small band of men to raid the Takeda camp near the Saiga cliff. However, this story is considered anecdotal, as is another tale regarding Hattori Hanzo's rearguard action that held off the Takeda troops with a group of shinobi. Unfortunately, these tales lack much historical validity, as no contemporary sources mention them. In any case, Takeda Shingen had been successfully convinced that Tokugawa Ieyasu had still some fighting force to oppose him. He was also worried about Oda Nobunaga coming to his allies' assistance, and Uesugi Kenshin taking advantage of his absence from Kai. He and his generals therefore decided that the best course of action was to retreat to Kai and come back next year. Fortunately for Ieyasu, Shingen would not live that long. While besieging Noda Castle in Mikawa not even a month later, the legendary Tiger of Kai fell ill, while another popular tale tells that the Takeda daimyo fell victim to one of the snipers posted on the castle's ramparts, who shot Shingen in the head when the latter approached the castle walls to better hear a flute player. In any case, by April of 1573, Shingen had passed away, and Ieyasu had dodged a great threat. However, the war with the Takeda clan was far from over. In the next episode, we will see the culmination of this conflict, as well as the tragedy of Matsudaira Nobuyasu. So make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.